this striking day, the Ukrainian Armed Forces destroyed 3 important targets. The Kremlin is in shock. Sensational. Our drones broke through the enemy's defenses and hit the port directly. The Russian fleet is slowly but surely going under. The Kremlin is preparing a second front. Russia has set its sights on a European country, but the Ukrainian Armed Forces have already given a tough response. Watch for all the latest explosive events you might have missed.
Everything is stable in Russia. The night was loud and bright. Explosions thundered in Tuapse. The local port was attacked by naval drones. The occupiers can't hide on the front either. Ukrainian border guards destroyed 5 enemy shelters along with the Russians inside. Bashkortostan and Vologda also came under attack. 4 military logistics facilities of the occupiers were destroyed at once. Ukraine's defense forces continue clearing Pokrovsk of occupiers. Russian troops have temporarily slowed the pace of their offensive in the city and its surroundings. At the same time, the invaders are blocking Ukrainian logistics in Mirnorad, hoping to break the city's defenses, according to the Institute for the Study of War.
The occupiers are trying to take control of the defense forces' logistics not only in Pokrovsk, but also accordingly in the Mirnorad area. The sharp increase in the number of attacks in the Shakov area, this is a key settlement that was deoccupied by Ukraine's defense forces, and control over it creates a threat to the entire Russian occupational forces incursion in the Dobropilya direction.
The intensity of fighting in Pokrovsk has decreased, but this does not mean that the Russians have abandoned their plans to occupy the city. The Ukrainian command has plans in place for various possible developments, stated the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr Syrsky.
The existence of 2 plans indicates that all possible scenarios for the development of events in Pokrovsk and the Pokrovsk agglomeration are being worked out. According to the Russian side itself, Russian army losses in Pokrovsk are comparable to those in Bakhmut. Let me remind you, the losses of the Russian occupation army in Bakhmut amounted to about 90,000 personnel.
And while the Ukrainian armed forces are fighting the occupiers, Putin is making new plans. Volodymyr Zelensky considers it quite likely that Russia could open a second front against another European country before the war in Ukraine ends.
The Russian Federation is probing for a weak link in the defense system of NATO countries. In other words, it casts doubt on the very possibility of practically implementing Article 5 of the NATO Charter on Collective Security. In addition, the Russian Federation is constantly trying to raise the level of tension. And at the borders with NATO countries, we're talking about Finland and Sweden.
For the past several years, Russia has been actively using elements of hybrid warfare, although Moscow traditionally denies any involvement. Against the backdrop of Russian drone incursions, Britain is strengthening Belgium's defenses, while in Germany they have admitted that they are not yet ready for war.
It's not just about a shortage of medical supplies, but the German side is also forced to admit that at the moment there is a shortage of both personnel and accordingly equipment for the Bundeswehr. This is precisely why the German government's program is focused on funding both the German defense industry and accordingly strengthening the country's defense capabilities of the German state. That's why it's no coincidence that Germany ranks second after the United States in terms of military technical assistance to Ukraine.
Meanwhile, in Moscow, they continue to rattle their nuclear sabers. It seems this is the Kremlin's eternal scenario. The ever-talking Yusuputino Peskov made it clear that if the US actually conducts a nuclear test, Russia will be forced to respond in kind.
According to Western intelligence agencies, there is currently increased activity by the Russian side at the test site on the Ark-Pelaginaya Zemlya. In other words, this is yet another escalation of the so-called stakes on the part of Putin and accordingly the Russian Federation. Putin fully understands that the nuclear argument is the last resort that the Russian Federation can use in negotiations with the United States at the moment of ending the war in Ukraine.
In turn, Ukraine, together with its partners in the European Union, is preparing a proposal for the 20th package of sanctions against Russia, which should include additional restrictions on the Russian energy sector, the shadow fleet, and companies that support the aggressor's military-industrial complex.
Europe is urgently shifting onto a war footing. The continent is building drone walls, a massive shield against Russian attacks. And here's the sensation. Ukraine will be at the center of this defense. Our experience in destroying enemy UAVs is now saving all of Europe. What is behind this project and who is most afraid of it? Watch this.
After a series of Russian drone incursions, the vulnerability of European airspace became obvious. The old air defense systems can no longer cope. Cheap attack drones, flying in swarms, break through conventional defense schemes and deplete stocks of expensive missiles and combat aircraft. It was precisely this challenge that pushed the European Union toward the ambitious Drone Wall initiative.
Virtually all countries, regardless of region, whether it's Eastern, Northern, or Western Europe, have encountered manifestations of this new type of hybrid action by the Russian Federation in the skies, violating airspace. And the fact that a response is needed is already undeniable.
The idea is to create a unified defense system along the EU's eastern border, where sensors, radars, satellites, interceptors, and artificial intelligence will be able to detect, classify, and neutralize threats in real time. We
must create a European system that will enable Europe to develop advanced solutions in the field of drones, drawing inspiration from what is already being done in Ukraine.
It is Ukraine that will play a key role in this development. 4 years of war have made Ukrainian experience critically valuable. Here, tactics are tested, technologies are refined, and production chains for combat and counter-drone systems are formed under real combat conditions, not on a training ground.
Now, drones have changed absolutely everything. And the best drone experts in the world are Ukrainians. I have seen videos of situations where a swarm of drones is deployed against a single soldier. Even a single drone can lure a soldier into a trap while another attacks him from the other side. In other words, we are already seeing how drones are becoming increasingly deadly. This will change the way wars are fought in every country. Not just drones, but also how to protect your roads, how to secure your airports, how to prevent drones from invading your territory. That's why Europe must quickly learn from the Ukrainians how to defend its skies.
Ukraine offers not only experience but also an industrial base. Local manufacturers such as Techex can supply equipment, train operators, share combat experience, and standardize solutions to meet Europe's needs. The integration of Ukrainian technologies and expertise will make it possible to create adaptive, fast, and cost-effective systems capable of operating in real combat time. Funding is already being worked out through the SAVE instrument and the EU defense budget, which provides up to 100 billion euros for the eastern flank. The drone wall's flank includes 3 directions: aerial, land, and maritime lines of defense, which must be integrated into a single system capable of controlling the airspace from the Baltic to the Black Sea.
Judging by the information and the news we read from different countries, self-determination is at the stage of finding or forming a consensus between the internal situation in each individual country, which may require changes in legislation, and how to coordinate these at a common level. In other words, in order to reach a common level, a unified position at the level of the European Union countries and NATO countries, it is necessary to coordinate it within each country, understanding that in some places this requires harmonizing legislation, while in others it requires more thorough explanation to the public so that things are clear. These were very welcome actions. There was support and an understanding of what is important for countries with democracy, where there is a constant electoral process, where any step can be used by the opposition.
This project is part of a larger strategy called Shield 2030. These are 4 initiatives aimed at strengthening the EU's external borders, protecting against drones, creating a unified air defense system, and even providing for space services for military needs. The main goal is to deter Russia and Belarus, especially considering that by 2030 the capabilities of the Russian armed forces may increase. The plan is to strengthen the eastern border by the end of 2026 and by 2027 to deploy a protective wall against drones. At the same time, the EU is creating an integrated air defense system, while space services, intelligence, communications, and navigation will support defense tasks. However, experts warn that bureaucracy and slow processes in Europe could delay the project. But if Europe manages to quickly establish this cooperation, the Shield 2030 could become a new line of defense that will protect not only EU countries, but also Ukraine.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
Sensational. The mystery of the Nord Stream explosions has been solved. 3 years of investigation, and German detectives have finally delivered shocking conclusions. Who really blew up Putin's pipelines? Why is Europe now divided into 2 camps? Everything that has been hidden for 3 years. Watch it right now.
Nord Stream 2 is an exclusively economic project.
The investigation into the Nord Stream explosions is gaining momentum and threatens to undermine European support for Ukraine. The Wall Street Journal writes about this. On September 26, 2022, the Nord Stream 1 and 2 pipelines were destroyed on the floor of the Baltic Sea in neutral waters. At that time, both pipelines were not operational, but they were filled with technical gas. NATO called the incident an act of sabotage, and Russia's FSB opened a criminal case.
Everyone understands that these were terrorist attacks, but everyone also realizes that too many serious and influential Western figures have something to hide. They really don't want this investigation to be truly objective.
Initially, the investigation was started in Germany, Denmark, and Sweden. Subsequently, those countries stopped their investigations. The investigation concluded that they had no grounds to initiate a criminal case and that the case itself did not fall under their jurisdiction.
This investigation was conducted in a fairly traditional manner, and the investigators concluded that they could not accuse anyone of this. Accuse anyone. They had no evidence. So for us, the case is closed.
Germany continued the investigation.
We want to discuss this issue. It's not worth speculating. I can only say that we are very interested in clarifying this matter.
German investigators adhere to the version that the explosion was allegedly organized by Ukrainians. According to them, the goal was to reduce Russia's oil revenues and its energy ties with Germany. In total, according to the investigators, 7 people participated in the operation. 4 divers, an explosives expert, and the captain of the yacht Andromeda.
German investigators are confident that they have identified the perpetrators. In Italy, a Ukrainian citizen, Serhike, was arrested. A special forces unit under his command allegedly rented the sailing yacht Andromeda to access the pipelines. The federal prosecutor's office also mentions 5 other suspects. All of them are Ukrainian citizens, including 1 woman. It is believed that one of the perpetrators was killed in the war.
The decision regarding Kuznetsov was made by the Italian appellate court. Initially, the court of first instance refused the German side's request for extradition. However, the investigators appealed the decision and the appellate court sided with them. Kuznetsov is now awaiting a decision on Germany's request for extradition from Italy. The German police have already prepared a special plane to transport the Ukrainian to Hamburg.
Traces of explosives, intelligence data, and so on. We believe that this really did happen with the Andromeda, and that neither the CIA nor Russian intelligence services nor the Russian army are behind it. Many in Berlin are glad that investigations into unknown individuals are ongoing.
On September 30th, Ukrainian citizen Volodymyr Zhuravlyov was detained in Poland. He was wanted under a European arrest warrant. In October, a court in Poland decided to refuse the extradition of the suspect to Germany and ordered his immediate release.
My client is innocent. He has not committed any crimes either on German territory or against Germany. Since the prosecution first asked him this question, my client has consistently maintained that the accusation is abstract and unclear. This position remains unchanged.
According to the investigation, in Germany, Kuznetsov coordinated the work of the saboteurs, while Zhuravlyov sailed a yacht to the pipeline, dove underwater, and planted explosives.
What are the German authorities trying to achieve with this? And whose interests are they protecting? Does the property of the Russian state corporation Gazprom really deserve protection? Should those responsible really be held accountable in such a situation?
The decisive piece of evidence, as stated in Germany, was a grainy black and white photograph taken by a road surveillance camera. It allegedly shows the face of a Ukrainian diver. Warsaw considers Zhuravlev a hero, who destroyed the most important source of income for Vladimir Putin's war machine. Judge Dariusz Lubowski stated that the case has political overtones for Germany.
These actions were not illegal. On the contrary, they were justified, rational, and fair. They cannot be considered terrorists or saboteurs because by defending their homeland by any means, they are weakening the enemy.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk also commented on Germany's investigation.
We believe that the real problem was the construction of Nord Stream itself, not its destruction. a Polish court refused to extradite to Germany a Ukrainian suspected of blowing up Nord Stream 2 and released him from custody. And that was the right thing to do. The case is closed.
The decision of the Italian court regarding Kuznetsov's extradition could complicate relations between Ukraine and Germany and turn the Nord Stream case into a diplomatic crisis, according to Wall Street Journal journalists.
Politically, we firmly stand on the side of Ukraine. Russia has been waging a terrible, aggressive war against Ukraine for 3 years now. We are on Ukraine's side. But for me, it is important that Germany is a state governed by the rule of law and that we consistently investigate crimes committed within our jurisdiction.
Putin's German friends, the far-right Alternative for Germany party, have launched a campaign demanding a reduction in aid to Ukraine. This year, that same party celebrated the birthday of the Russian dictator Putin. Before that, they demanded the expulsion of Ukrainian refugees from Germany. That's all for now. And for more breaking news from the front, tune in to our next episode.